Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is another one of our newly formatted super special episodes where you'll get to hear Alberto Nunez, Jeff Alberts, and Brad Loomis having an in-person conversation at Jeff's house in Northern California. These three guys got together in July of 2018 to support our team of athletes at the WMBF Natural Muscle Mayhem, which is one of the largest and most reputable tested pro-am shows in the United States. The day after that competition, where we had 5 athletes, Brad, Bert, and Jeff sat down with a camera to record this podcast and reflect on the achievements of our athletes, what it takes to create a solid prep, and the shared qualities that successful career bodybuilders all seem to have in common. As soon as the recording starts, you'll hear Alberto give a little more detail about their conversation ahead, so I won't take up any more of your time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Here is How to Be a Good Competitive Bodybuilder with Jeff Alberts, Alberto Nunez, and Brad Loomis.
Hey, what's up, 3DMJers? So this last weekend was a special weekend for us. A long-lived tradition out here in NorCal, which is the Muscle Mayhem show, which I'm sure some of you guys know, some of you guys don't know about, but it's pretty much the best natural show that you can find on this side of the country. And per usual, or per most years, we brought ourselves a nice little group of people, some really solid athletes. And that's basically what we're going to go over, because we have been getting messages from people about how awesome the crew that we brought looked, and how they at some point would like to attempt something like that or do something like that. And it got us to talking. Like, you know, there are some consistent patterns that we do see with athletes that bring it, for the lack of a better term. And what we're going to discuss about today is, we talk about the muscle, we talk about, other attributes that, you should develop as a physique competitor. But there are a few characteristics that we just see over and over when it comes to athletes who look that awesome. And that is going to be today's theme. So I guess to kick things off, Jeff, they were all of Jeff's athletes. He was the guy working. Usually we kind of split them amongst like all of us, but Jeff was the guy with the Mayhem athletes. So he kind of he knows exactly what went on behind the scenes. So I mean, I guess to kick it off, you'd like to elaborate a bit on the athletes that he did bring and their unique story and things that they do right that got him looking like that.
Yeah, man. I think the big thing is just all 5 of them, really. It was more about just execution. Like, there wasn't too many mistakes along the way, so the precision, how they executed, was pretty top notch, and then the consistency that went on with it. But I think the big thing is that the first thing was the timeline. Yeah. Like, they basically had enough time to make it happen. Yeah. So I think that was really key, just having a nice game plan from the get-go, making sure the timeline was realistic, and then the big thing was just the daily consistency. And like I always tell you guys, like, there's 2 ways to kind of characterize a prep as far as people, how they approach the execution. This is hilarious. Yeah. And like, some people, when they eat, they get some crumbs on the table. One guy will put the crumbs in his hand and put it in the trash can, and then maybe the other guy's like, I'll just wipe those crumbs on the floor. So that's what kind of separates, someone who gets in like really great conditioning versus someone who's maybe lacking a little bit. It's just the people that are getting the crumbs in the garbage can, their execution is just a little bit more on point.
So for sure, that's one thing we've always heard, is like, you just need plenty of time. Because that's one of the main reasons that, we had to create some sort of formal off-season program, because people were showing up like, hey, hook me up, and it's like, no, it don't work like that, man. I need twice the time, and our starting point's not that great. So the time thing, and then people know that. I think a lot of you guys are like, know that, hey, I have 12 weeks, 16 weeks. I don't think so. But the whole crumb thing, I think, because a lot of the people who don't wipe their crumbs, I think the people who do take care of their crumbs, they know exactly what you mean. But the other folks, the folks who don't, they have no clue. They've kind of been going about a lot of things that way. So what does that mean exactly when someone does that with their crumbs?
It's like they kind of just cut corners. Like it's a little bit of, you could call it a little bit of laziness, maybe. Maybe they're not aware. But it's like, okay, if your macros are, let's say, 50 fat, 250 carbs, it's like, that's not 60 fat, it means 50.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, you might be nibbling on something and think like, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of it, that can really impact the end result. So it's really about making sure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's and not letting any stone left unturned.
Yeah.
I could go back to a prep I had where it's like a week before a show, I had a box of ding dongs. It was like just one slip up, but it really did impact the end product. And it's like, that's the regret I had with that prep, was like, man, what if I wouldn't have done that? Would I have moved up in placing? Would I have looked better? It's like, and you just leave yourself, through an entire off season just thinking like, what if? It's a lot of regret. So
getting to slip ups. Another reason, I guess, is leave yourself plenty of time. I mean, 95% of people are going to slip up. And if you give yourself enough time, you can probably handle those slip ups. So did any of your guys slip up? Did any of them have a little binge here?
I would say
ding dongs?
The 5, I can, off the top of my head, say that maybe 1 or 2 of them were perfect in the prep, where like everything, like there was no slip ups, everything was executed as planned. The other 3, there were some slip ups. So having that time, like you said, is like, you can make up ground if you have those setbacks.
Any panicking during the slip ups, or because you had time there was really no reason to panic?
I mean, anytime you slip up, you're gonna feel a little bit of guilt that goes with that, and your first instinct is to like, oh shit, I need to make up for that. So I need to, hey, maybe let's cut more food, let's do more cardio. But usually if it's just you have that time, you can kind of just get back on the game plan, just roll with it, and eventually you kind of settle back in and you're fine. And the last thing I want to do as a coach is to double up someone's cardio, let's say, or to just like create even more of a deficit. So you have to go back to the root cause. Why did they slip up? And usually if it's a binge, let's say, it's because they're hurting. Like their hunger levels are just crazy. They're digging, as a coach, maybe I dug them a little too hard. So I learn as well, like, okay, I know now, okay, they're like where they're at, like, okay, how far can I push them without breaking them? So what I don't want to do is like, okay, let me try to fix this, drop everything, just get more aggressive with protocols, because it's just going to create a vicious cycle. It's probably going to happen again. So I just let things play out, and usually things clean up after a few days and we start progressing again. And I think it's like, if you have the time, I think it's not a bad thing if you experience that, because we're not perfect, we're human, and it teaches you, it teaches you about yourself. What are your limits? And I think a lot of people, when they binge, they think, oh, I'm weak. But for me, like when I binge, it's somewhat a weakness, like you caved in maybe, but you learn from it, and you actually become the strength knowing what your weaknesses are and what your capabilities are. So you can basically game plan around that a little bit better the next time.
Hey, but I'm glad we bring that up. Like the lean athletes, the ones that look right, they're not necessarily perfect, because I think some people prep, and because they have 2 more rice cakes than they should. We'll talk about your story after. Like they're like, I'm not meant to do this. I should stop this. And it completely it throws out a lot of the optimism they might have started the prep with. So like being perfect is not necessarily a requirement, but you want to minimize the bumps, but then also it's like having the proper response. Most athletes are not perfect. I've worked with I can count them in one hand, like hundreds of athletes. I can count them in one hand. The ones that allegedly, like, I don't know, they might have goofed up at some point, but you don't have to be perfect.
No,
not necessarily.
No, it's just more about being consistent.
Yeah.
Like you want to try to get all the crumbs in the garbage, but hey, a couple are going to get on the ground. Like, how are you going to clean it up? Well, I get the vacuum out, clean up those little bit of crumbs, but we want to try to aim for as much precision as possible. But I mean, again, we're not human. We're human, and I think I've prepped maybe 14 times total.
Yeah.
I've only had maybe like 2 preps where I've actually never cheated, or never binged, or made a mistake. Like I've had my ups and downs, even in the last couple of preps where I've reached like the upper levels of the sport.
It's yeah, even those guys, like the pros, the top, like if you talk to them, like no one's perfect at all, but yeah, they the time thing, the attitude, the I guess the commitment to trying to be as excellent as possible. Is that the Raiders thing? Commitment to excellence. So yeah, those are 2. Is there any other one, Brad, that you see frequently that in athletes that find success?
I think getting back to our athletes that we had at the Mayhem, of the 2 that say they were perfect, there were no slip-ups, binges. Did life get in the way? I mean, sometimes we want to have enough time, just because sometimes there's going to be sticking points, or there's high stress, who knows, you got to move, new baby. Did any of your athletes experience any of that, and how did you handle that when life gets in the way?
Yeah, I mean, I had one gentleman where it's just like a lot of work hours, a lot of steps. He's on his feet. It's more of a physical job. He's on his feet a lot. Had to throw a lot of cardio his way, and had to dig him pretty hard. He's pretty his body's very resilient to losing body fat, so I had to really go a little ham on him to get him to move. But that's where I had to step up communications with this athlete to make sure that I'm not pushing him over the top, where I set him back further. Just because everybody has their breaking points. I don't care who you are. You push someone hard enough, they're going to break. Yeah. So that's where my communication came into play. Like, okay, where is this athlete at, and where those boundaries are. So yeah, it's delicate at times.
Again, the key though is enough time, right?
Yeah, it's just time. It's a time factor. So.
But yeah, athletes that it's funny because we talk about like being precise, like being on top of the details, but there's also a certain level of flexibility that, like, because also you have those athletes that they're perfect, that's what they want. Hey, they have the little deviation, and it's like they're done. So I think athletes that get there and they look right at the end, they're also they're flexible and they're able to deal with things that didn't necessarily go according to plan. That's something that I think is I've improved upon that skill, because the one that was easy for me, like, to start off with was like to be neurotic. Like if I need to do that, if I'm just all I have to do is like check that list like every day, I'll do it. But when I couldn't get to something, like, that used to freak me out, and I didn't always have the best response to that. So I think that's a huge one. Is like, hey, like every once in a while you got to be okay with collecting your 90% for the day. But I think the key thing is it's like not when you're like looking for 90%, because there's some guys, like, you remember that era where everyone had to have their Chipotle when they're prepping, they had to go to Chick-fil-A and things like that, and it's like why are you looking for trouble? Like, like when you can control everything, and then you have that work thing that you have to do, and then like that day it's like, okay, I'm gonna get my 80-90%. It's not 100%, but it's still 80-90%.
Yeah,
it's still a good day.
It's enough to keep you moving forward.
Yeah. And it's not gonna affect the end product, because like we were talking about last night, my first prep I was 100%. I was perfect. Obviously very antiquated. It was a meal plan. I didn't even weigh myself. I just stepped down calories each and every week, but it was rigid, super rigid. But the end product was very, very good. I was shredded. Won my first competition, the overall in the novice. Very next competition, again, very rigid, but I came to that point when I should have been flexible and done that 90%. And it pushed me to a breaking point. Now, keep in mind, this is not truly a breaking point, but I had 2 extra rice cakes than I should have. I was supposed to have 1 rice cake and 1 scoop of protein, and it was late at night, and I was in a moment of weakness, and I had 2 more rice cakes, because there was 3 in the package. And did it affect the end product? No, it didn't. I was just as lean, won my class, contended for the overall and the pro card, but that tiny bit of flexibility did not hurt at all. So I think having picking your shots. That's a good way that you like to put it.
Because it was like my 2011 prep where I binged on 33 rice cakes.
Yeah,
where you got pissed off. Where you should, if you're gonna binge on something better than rice cakes.
In hindsight, that was horrible advice because a burrito would have stuck to you.
It would have stuck a little bit more. But yeah, it's just because I was rigid. Like I didn't know myself. I didn't know my where I was going to be weak at. Like I didn't know, that breaking point. I was trying to push more than I probably should have been. In hindsight, I was just trying to do too much, and it just caved. And so, but I mean, I didn't sit there after it happened. Like after eating all those rice cakes and going way over, my body weight shot up quite a bit, and it was like 9 days before the Pro International, my very first pro show. I had a binge 9 days out. I didn't have a meltdown or freak out. I'm just like, you know what? It is what it is. I screwed up. Let's learn from this. Let's not have a pity party about it. Like you always say, let's not just have amnesia and move forward. And that's basically what I did. And I didn't try to. The good thing is the decision I made was not to try to double down on cardio or really slam on the lower the macros down. I just get back on it, keep moving forward. Long story short, I got leaner 9 days later and took second in my first pro show.
But I think tight first and second too.
If I would have probably said, you know what, let me double down on cardio and really go ham. Exactly. Would I have been able to stick with that? Would I have binged again? And then what would I have looked on stage? Would I have looked more flat, more depleted, more run down? So I think, again, having that flexibility and understanding where you're at as far as how you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and knowing it's okay sometimes to pull back when you need to, because it could actually, propel you forward a little bit better.
Yeah. And this brings up a good point. The athlete that won the overall, we're pretty close with that athlete. We've coached him in the past. Yeah. And
he's still one of our dudes, aces.
For sure, yeah. He was repping 3DMJ, of his own free will. But you guys can probably elaborate on this a little bit more. He brought his best ever. He was his best ever, and he came up against a juggernaut of an athlete. Very, very blessed genetically. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't you guys say that he still slipped up a couple times, but it didn't affect him? Like it had in previous preps?
Yeah, I think he just stopped. It was one of those things where I guess for a lot of people, the mindset is like, hey, I just went from what was a 100% day, now it's an 80% day. But they don't see it that way. They kind of see it as like your 2 rice cake thing. Like I'm not 100%. There's only 100% and there's everything else. And I think his slip-ups were probably, they were probably more along the lines of like, you know what, I had 300 extra calories today. If I'm just consistent from this point on, okay, punch out the math, run the averages, it's like it didn't even happen. And I think that was the biggest thing. Like even his decision making, since he was self-coached for this prep, he was like, you know what, I'm gonna run something for 4 weeks and see what happens. And I think it's maybe a little bit more conservative than how we like to analyze data, but nevertheless, for someone who's like running their own stuff and you have a hard time being objective with yourself, I think it's better to do it that way. So he just set himself up to never let emotional decisions take charge. And 2 slip-ups, but I couldn't tell.
I think no, you couldn't tell. But I think we're talking about a veteran who's been training for over 20 years. So he knows himself really well.
30 shows, I think he said.
And I think right now, if you're younger or you haven't really, if you've never prepped or you only prepped maybe a couple times, you probably don't know yourself too well yet. And to put so much pressure on yourself to try to be perfect and not to allow mistakes, because that's where you're going to learn is in the mistakes. So if you put so much pressure on yourself to try to be perfect, if you end up being perfect, I mean, more power to you. But if you put so much pressure on yourself, 1, you may not learn as much as you could, but 2, you're not going to enjoy it as much as you could either. Like if you're just a stress ball the whole way through, I mean, when you look back on it, you're going, damn, man, I was so stressed I didn't even enjoy it. And that was something I stressed to all 5 of my guys that were in this show the whole way through, is like, let's enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the process. And when you get on the day of the show, that's a celebration. So regardless where they placed, I mean, I can say, like, watching all of them, they seem like they generally had a good time, regardless where they're kind of ending up at the end of the day. That
kind of bounces off something else we were talking about, and this had to do with this is I think for a few people like a kind of a touchy subject in some ways.
Hi again. Just wanted to remind you guys that we have a pretty giant video library of educational materials at 3dmjvault.com. The Vault is a place we can organize our best information, pair it with some of our favorite resources, and share it with all of you in one online database. We have courses on contest prep, hypertrophy, posing, fat loss, postseason recovery, and a whole bunch more. A lot of it is free. Some of it is for purchase to help support this podcast, and we continue adding pieces of updated content to it every couple months that members always have unlimited access to. Once again, that's at 3dmjvault.com, and we really hope you like it.
The more experienced you are, the more preps you have under your belt, the better you're going to be. It's not necessarily an issue that I've ran into, but kids are just so much smarter than we were, when we were in our early 20s and just rolling with competitive bodybuilding. And sometimes what happens is because they know all the facts and how things work. It's like it's one thing to know how things work, and it's another thing to remember how things work when you're in the middle of all that chaos. Mm-hmm. And you're not prepared for how much this freaking hurts. It's very hard to explain to someone how much this hurts if you're peeled, and that's why there's this brotherhood of peeled bodybuilders. Mm-hmm. People who come in in proper shape. There's just so much respect that we have for each other, because to get to that point, there's just so many points that you've hit a wall that you just have to tough it out through. And that's one thing that I think some folks out there might find it kind of, well, that's borderline disappointing, but we don't just focus on getting people shredded. We take into consideration all the moving parts, and sometimes we can only get an athlete as shredded as they're ready to be.
Yeah. Or as they'll let us be. Or
it's
as they'll let us be.
When I asked Nick, who is arguably the leanest guy in the show, I said, hey man, he was just downright scary as far as conditioning level. I said, hey man, you think you could do this your last prep? He's like, no way. So I think that's something to be said. He went to another level and realized how hard that was, and probably where he was at 3 years ago, that mindset, the mental capacity, he probably could not handle that. And I think that's something as a coach, I think what we've talked about before is if we have someone that's their first season, are they capable? And if they are capable, then the question is, what's going to happen after the season's over? How healthy are they going to be after? And are they going to be able to do this 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now again? So looking at it from a longevity and a sustainability standpoint, I think, to me, it's important. It's huge to consider that. And that, Zach, who is, one of my leaner guys, that was something we talked about the day before the show, because he has a show 3 weeks from now. Hey, man, I think we can push another 2 or 3 pounds off you. Do you have it in you to do that? Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, I think I can do it. And we talked about it, whether that was something that we can do, and we both agreed on it. Keep in mind, this is his second prep. This is second prep together, so I know him, he knows me pretty well, and I think that's important that conversation happened in order not just to get in better shape for a show, but just from an overall health standpoint, from the physical, the mental, emotional side of it, I think is huge.
Because here's the deal: it's we know what volume dials to play with. We know what variables we need to turn up in order to get the results we want. Hani, actually, that was a great example. He was on a Hani from TSA. He's a sensational powerlifting coach, and this line absolutely just seals the deal. He was talking about, I guess, especially young athletes trying to, rush to be as strong as they can be today. And he brought up the fact that, he's got the training block somewhere in there that will put 75 pounds on your squat in 8 to 10 weeks, but he's not going to give it to you because you'll get there, but what happens afterwards? And I think that's huge, especially for coaches who because there's more people out there, I think, now that know how to get people to progress, right? But there's a lot of coaches out there as well who I feel sometimes are not thinking past this first goal and what so I hope is this long career that you enjoy, but just are interested in getting that trophy athlete. I got this guy that strong, I got this guy that peeled, and I mean we've heard stories of people who are just all sorts of jacked up afterwards because the coach, all they thought about was this right now. But yeah, I do it all the time.
Yeah. There's a
that.
certain amount of you need to protect the athlete from themselves sometimes, because yes, you're right. We all want it now. We want to be peeled tomorrow. We want to add that 75 pounds to our squat, in the next week. And just like cars have a governor, sure, you can run that engine 9,000 RPM. It's a good chance it's going to blow up. And then what are you left with? You're left with a big bag of pieces, right? And we as athletes, we have that same mindset. We want to be jacked tomorrow. We want to be peeled tomorrow, and we need that governor. And that's where we kind of have to come in, and we just kind of have to say, look, we need a governor here. We need to back things down a little bit and find out what you're capable of. A lot of times with seasoned competitors, they've kind of experienced that. They felt it. They know what it feels like. They know what they can execute and what they can't execute.
Exactly.
And when you're that first time, either A, you make a plan that's too stringent and you can't stick to it, and then you're disappointed because you didn't get the result that you were after. Or B, they're smart enough to know, okay, I can get away with a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, and I don't have to worry about, hitting exactly that 50 grams of fat that coach gave me. And they haven't even experienced it the first time around to know if that 50 grams is really needed or how much they can get away with.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of it's two things that that those seasoned athletes have experienced, either when they've worked with a coach or just experience.
Yeah.
They felt it, and they know what they can get away with and what they can't. Because there's going to be times where you're going to need to be meticulous and rigid.
It's a hard sell, though.
It is. It's very hard.
Because we're bodybuilders. We're very goal-oriented. And even myself made the mistake, we were talking about this yesterday, that I should have ended this last prep a long time ago. But I was just so determined to get to where I wanted to go. It was just like a decision that was a bad decision. Like I should have just said, you know what? I'm done. Let me regroup, reset, and then go towards a longer-term approach. And it's a hard sell. Like when you have a first timer or someone who's like very gold and they want to get peeled, they want to win a pro card, and if you tell them, hey, it's better if we do this approach now, get the experience. Like, okay, get you in great shape the best we can, but in a healthy way, so you're in a better prepared state later, and you'll make an even bigger splash later. It's a hard sell. The long game is definitely a hard sell, but I think it's. With some people, it's definitely the better approach.
Sometimes you just have to downright scare them. You just have to say, look, we can get you peeled, but what good is it to be peeled if we're going to lose 5 pounds of muscle? And what's that going to do for your next prep? What's that going to do for your off season when you're trying to regain all of that tissue again?
Yeah, because when we talk about coping, it's for sure like the mental side of things. Like there's no sport that hurts like this. Like when you get to that point, it's true human starvation. That's exactly what it is. There's no way like to work around that, and you're expected to train hard. Like some people they haven't trained like in that sort of environment long enough to know how to maneuver through it, because that in itself is a skill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because a lot of times, Jeff, you talk about this being an extreme sport, and people will sometimes relegate to extreme sports being motocross, where yes, you can do yourself bodily harm in an instant. You can break a leg, you could break an arm, you could damage your back. Really, if you think about it, we could be doing more damage to ourselves going through these periods of extreme starvation than a broken leg. A broken leg is going to heal in 6 weeks. But and Jeff and I talked about this yesterday, it's like, how many more preps do I really have in me, knowing the long-term effects of these preps, And that's something that kind of pops up in my mind a lot, is ever since I heard him say that, this is like, in my opinion, the extreme of extreme sports.
The injuries are up here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's getting, the conditioning level's getting, just from 3 years to now, it's like, it's leaps and bounds. Gotten better. So how do you get there? It just means dieting longer and persevering longer. In a nutshell, like, more aggressive, not so much, because you're going to end up flat and depleted.
Exactly.
Like, it's more about you got to prolong this, you got to extend it out longer, and it's like that can break you mentally and emotionally. You can make it, but then it's like once the handcuffs are off, your show's over. Then what happens? What's next?
Yeah.
When you're freaking just like in a state where you don't even want to get off the couch to take a leak.
And you're fragile on top of it.
Yeah, there's no way around the experience. Not until you get on, like, it's like, people see the NFL, like, compared to like, say, 30 years ago, and they're just zipping, and men are 260 pounds and flying and colliding.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with our sport. And it's, some people think they're ready to be thrown in that, and no, absolutely not. And there's legit people out there who is like, okay, we can have a good prep right now, or if we just follow this pace that I kind of have thought out for you, you can have, like, many preps at the end, and we'll at the end go much further than we would have had we just focused on, like, let's absolutely just drill you today. Yeah,
because I could tell you, just like probably just in this segment, just when I went through a lot of my earlier preps, it was like hard as shit.
Yeah.
And then I would get to the end of the prep and say, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
Like, I was just so fried and burnt out. Like, I'm retiring. And then I'd go away for 2 years. And I hate this sport.
Yeah.
And then, like, after 2 years, okay, now I'm starting to feel good.
When
I'm getting motivated again.
When you forget what that felt like.
But now I want to make it for the athletes we work with not to be, like, this on-off, like, I hate it, I love it, but more of, like, a dimmer switch where... if you're younger, okay, if you can handle more aggressiveness, then let's do it. But if not, let's just over a 5-year, 10-year stretch, you'll just continually get better and better. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. You'll be more well equipped to deal with where you need to go in this sport, this extreme sport that the conditioning level in another 5 years, I'm like scared to see where it's gonna go.
If you just like peeling skin off, that's what seems like. That's where we're going,
No, because here's the thing: is like, and I think you guys can confirm this: is that if you do things wrong early on and you exceed what you actually can handle, those are almost things that you cannot get back afterwards. Like whatever your willpower would have been, because you made these errors early on, you don't get that back almost.
Yeah.
So if you keep an athlete, you give them what they can handle, eventually based off like their experience, and then working longer with them, 4 or 5 preps down the road, they're going to be something else.
Yeah.
Because there's things that I've done with myself in regards to willpower. I'm like, man, that probably screwed me up just a little bit still today, and I'm aware of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, right? Like you can still feel those old injuries.
Oh yeah.
Those old scars are still there.
The other one, it's funny. It's like there's all these moving parts, which is crazy, and some of them kind of conflict with each other. So I feel that sometimes, like if one of your athletes puts it out there that this is what they were doing in regards to cardio, in regards to what they were eating calorie wise, how long they've been prepping, people right away assume like, ooh, we probably weren't very efficient on the coaching end. And no, it's just, guess what? Like, this is really freaking hard. Like, most people have a hard time getting, like, summer ready. Like, when you want to get show ready, it's gonna suck. And, like, you have to go into, you have to develop some sort of love for that side of the game if you want to exceed it. It's like, you want to feel some of that. So anyone want to...
It's like embracing the suck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the one gentleman I talked about earlier where I had to basically push him harder than I would like. If I was to let's say put his numbers out there, put his step count out there, and his cardio, people would be like, "What are you doing to this guy?"
Yeah.
But that's what we had to do to go there. But what was important that I did was, again, establish more communication to see what his tolerance is to it. Can he persevere through it? And I think that's it's like invaluable that he has to experience this, but yet communicate with me so that way I know when to pull back or even push harder. Like at times he was saying I can do more. I'm like, okay, he's actually coming to me and saying I can do more. So he's experiencing the protocol as invasive as I thought it was, but actually he's like, I can tolerate it, give me more. So I think it's important that you get into those grinder weeks in your prep, or a grinder set, so you know what your capabilities are. It's important.
And it's important too to recognize, and you probably have done this before, where they say they can tolerate more, but again, they probably haven't really felt it yet.
Oh, we know too. We know which ones can't.
Exactly.
We know.
Exactly.
We know.
And I think it's a good idea that you experience that grinder set, that really, really hard set where you dang near pass out. You probably need to experience that suck of, wow, I'm hungry. I am really low on energy, and I feel like my strength is just plummeting. But at the same time, what good is it to go there and they can't adhere to the protocol? They can't execute the protocol. There's really no reason to even do that. And us as coaches, again, we need to be that governor, and we need to say, look, you know what, we tried it, you felt it, and it's not going to work this time around. We're just going to have to kind of, and I hate to use this term, but it's true, we're going to have to settle. We're going to have to settle a little bit and know, okay, this is what you're capable of doing this prep. Maybe next prep, stress levels will be lower, you'll be in a different mindset. Who knows? But there's a big difference between wanting to do something and not being able to follow through, and wanting to do something and then as you're experiencing it, wanting to do it and not feeling like you're trapped.
If I give something like, okay, I'm going to grind you right here, and I'll say, okay, this is what you're probably going to experience, because I've been there, done that. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to try to give this person some
preparation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not the same as when you actually feel it. Like someone can tell you all day long, but until you experience it, that's when you truly realize how shit this can be either hard or easy. And man, the gentleman I was talking about earlier, it's like there's moments where I say, all right, time to pull back here. I'm going to throw some refeeds at you, and some bigger ones too, because I know, like you said, I don't want to break them. Because if I break them, let's say a 400 carb refeed, that could turn into an 800 carb refeed. If I'm not careful. And so that's the main. And then they're getting set back further. Like if I would have just said, instead of going, let's say 100 carbs on someone, maybe 150 would have been a little bit better. Maybe the progress would have been a little bit slower than the 100, but I didn't have that 2 steps back with that 800 carb binge, because he couldn't handle the 100 carbs for that long of a period of time.
One thing I'd love to hear too, Jeff, since they were your athletes that were at this particular show, how much of this did you use on those athletes that we're talking about right now? Like all of it, some of it?
Yeah, I mean, that is the early stages of prep. It's not going to be as invasive, but as it gets deeper and deeper, it gets harder and harder. So towards the end, like it's like, okay, let's start auto-regulating refeeds. Let's see what kind of response we're getting during the week. Let's see where you're at. Let's see where your weigh-ins are at. Let's see how you're looking visually. If you're flat, you're full. Tell me how you're feeling, energy levels, how well is your training, is it recovery? So all those variables I take into account, and that would basically depend. That's how I would gauge their refeeds down the stretch. So it's a little more auto-regulated with some of the individuals. Some other individuals, their bodies are very predictable and they're very tolerable to the protocol. So I had one, Zach in particular, he just says, hey coach, what do I need to do? Tell him, okay, I'll get it done. And his body is very predictable. So I think he would be 147 tomorrow, Zach, and he wake up and go, you're right again. It's just his body is just so predictable. And again, it goes back to the precision and the consistency. So I'm giving protocol, and this guy is just like a machine. He's executing pretty damn precise. So it's just like that data that was built up, you establish the predictability, it's there. Like you just know, okay, this is what's been going on this whole time. This is how he's handled it the whole time. So, and then that communication is like, yeah, I can do it. I can handle it.
Yeah. So, and the flip side of that, what did you experience on the guys that were more auto-regulated?
Is a little unpredictable. Like still precision is there, consistency is there, and execution. But yet a lot of like the weigh-ins are like kind of all over the place, and their emotions and their ability to basically handle what I was throwing at them was not as, let's say, as good at times. So there's a little bit more on my part, a little more stress as a coach, like making judgment calls. But yeah, it was definitely challenging at times. But I think it all worked out in the end for the most part. And what's understanding is that I don't just say, here's your adjustment. I'm like, you know what? You're a little more unpredictable. And I communicate that with them. Like, I'm just honest. Hey, I'm having a hard time, figuring you out. So that communication is important. So together they can give me feedback, not just the numbers in a spreadsheet, but, hey, this is what I'm seeing as well. I look flat, I look full, my performance is this or that. So that goes a lot into the calls I was making. But yeah, towards the end, I become a little bit more auto-regulated with my adjustments, and so less. I don't rely on my systems as much in a way. Like, okay, here I got 5 low, 2 high, and it's like the same days every week. I get a little more auto-regulated in my adjustments towards the end with some of my athletes that are a little less predictable.
Yeah, that's really good. That's kind of using more of that experience and that gut feel. My gut's telling me, here's what we should do. Yeah.
So, I mean, I rely a lot on my 32 years of experience doing it. So
Yeah.
okay, I use mine, but then I also use their data that I built up as well, like all through the prep. I said, okay, this is what's kind of happened along the way. This is how their behaviors are. And everything. I put it all into account when I make an adjustment. Sometimes it works out great, sometimes not so much. You're like, okay, that didn't work too well. Let's talk about it and let's find something else that might work.
Yeah. Where do you fall in that? Are you pretty predictable, would you say, Alberto, or do you tend to be unpredictable?
Myself, or
yourself.
As me as an athlete.
As an athlete, yeah.
Oh, I'm so straightforward. It's ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But like for example, like the last prep I did, I was traveling so much. Things were just not very consistent in regards to my environment, so I didn't really have set numbers. I kind of knew that I should bump up my carbs here, bring them down here, but that's just because I know this is what 175 to 170 should feel like in terms of suck. This is what 170 to 165 should feel like, and and then the last 2 pounds, I know exactly what that should feel like. So
that's the experience right there.
But that's exactly what that is, and I mean, I do have a body that's very straightforward, and that definitely helps. But as straightforward as it's been when I started, I couldn't have done that before.
Oh, for
and that's
sure.
one thing your athletes do, is that they do a good job of getting out of your way, because there's certain things that you could just not explain, but you just know that this is going to work.
Yeah.
And this is what we have to do. You can't, and it's like you wouldn't have known this before.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a move that you expected or you had back here. It's like, no, I know this is it. Like, put in this play. It's going to happen.
And there's no way that you're going to be able to send me the scientific study that shows that that's more effective.
No. You just...
Like with Zach, the first prep, he's like, hey, we did a lot of things different this prep. I'm like, yeah, well, one, I learned more as a coach about the science stuff, because that's changed over the last 3 years since I prepped him.
Yeah.
So a lot new things were implemented, but also I know him better now. Whereas the first prep, I was still, as a coach, learning him, and he was learning himself as well.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when you get an athlete, you kind of want them to stick around a little bit longer, more than just one prep. That way, like, it's just the experience level from both sides.
Yeah.
Perspective is huge.
Yeah. And that makes it so much easier as a coach, too, when you've worked with an athlete over their career as opposed to this last 8 or 12 week stretch. It's so much more helpful. Sometimes I just feel like an 8, 12 week stretch, I'm just shooting in the dark. I am relying more on science and the studies and not on experience. Yeah.
Like, even with Josh, like, this is our first prep together, and I still don't know him fully yet as far as, like, how things operate. Towards the end there's a couple little binges there, and I didn't think that was going to happen because he was rock solid through the whole thing. But again, it's like he got to a certain level of leanness, and I'm pretty sure it's like, oh shit, this is what this feels like?
Yeah.
Experience that.
Holy shit, this is what it feels like. And he kind of put himself in a little bit of a predicament, went with his friends to the movies, they went to a buffet, he thought he was going to go in there and just all have a salad or something, and before you know it,
those primal instincts kicked in. Yeah.
It's like, hey dude, his body's like screaming, I'm starving, I don't want to die here. So now I know, okay, like, as a coach, okay, hey,
and he knows.
I know how to adjust things now next time. And science isn't going to tell me that.
Exactly.
It's like more like, okay, that experience that we went through.
Yeah.
So now I know.
So even if you're a 19-year-old freak of nature, like experience is not something you could just throw in your PayPal card. Sorry.
Yeah.
And what's cool about him, though, is like right away he said, I messed up, and this is what I want you to know, so we can move forward.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of guilt there, of course. We've all been there. When we slip up, we feel guilty.
Yeah.
I just said, hey, don't trip. Amnesia. Let's just move forward. You're gonna be fine. By the end of the week, he was leaner.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how sometimes there's a big difference between athletic maturity and actual, like, age maturity?
Yeah.
Like, I would not know that was a 19-year-old that did that. His athletic maturity is much higher than his age.
He's got a 35-year-old body.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I knew, like, at that point, because there was I think maybe a month later, there was another refeed that went a bit over. Nothing crazy, but I knew at that point, he's 19, it's his first prep. Yes, he's a phenom. Just because I have this genetic phenom that, he's making our whole team look good because of his genetics and his hard work ethic. if I was to push him at that point and get really crazy, I could break that kid.
Yeah. And he might not come back ever.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna push him harder than I need to. And it turned out well. Because
really well.
he still got on stage looking shredded. He was full. He had a great showing, but yet I kept him in check.
Yeah.
Like I didn't break him because now he's in a good spot to move forward, and he's got a good head on his shoulder. He knows like he's kind of in a way he's glad he lost because he's even told me.
And that was what he said.
He's like, I'm glad I lost because it just makes me want to work that much harder to get better.
It motivates him.
And he knows he needs time off season. He has life things coming up like college, so good head on his shoulder. And again, if I was to would have broke him.
Win or lose, he might not have ever done it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what I mean?
So we'll get applications sent to us with an athlete that's interested in a prep, and hey, let's be honest, like we get these apps and it's not even about a talent thing, but it's more so a lot of these things we've discussed. You get a feel by like how they write things, their decision making along the way, because we asked them to briefly go over their timeline. So there's these things that when we see, we're like, yes, like this is what I want. This is there's a lot of pros here, but then there's also some things that we're like, ooh, like wow, I'm gonna have to we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I guess what are some things that you guys like to see and don't like to see when a new athlete is sent your way?
Yeah, well, I can't tell you what I don't like to see. I don't like to see a brand new athlete who's never competed before put in there, what are your expectations, earn my pro card. To me, that's just, I don't know, it just turns me off almost immediately, regardless of if they're just genetic phenoms or not. It's kind of like I have a very like scientific nature about it. I'm like, first time around, it's kind of like that first go around when you're trying to invent something new. It's like you got to kind of establish a baseline. What can I accomplish here? What can I do? You got to have a baseline and then work for improvement after that, and yeah, I mean, sometimes some athletes, they are like Josh and they're hungry for more regardless of what the outcome was. And then other athletes, they did really well. They won their overall. Maybe they did earn the pro card, and they just found out that this is not for me. That's even if I did win, or even though I did win, it wasn't really worth it. And I'm glad I did it. I'm not going to have any regrets. But I think the big thing is you got to have a baseline. You got to see what you're capable of. I mean, some people are not capable of getting lean, super, super, super lean.
Yeah.
You can't train a small waistline. I'm never going to have the waistline that you guys have, but I had to at least experience that. Of course, I'm kind of dense. It took me 6-7 preps, to find that out, but you have to establish a baseline. So that's the one thing I don't like to see. I like expectations that are something to the effect of, I want to be my best ever.
Yeah.
I want to be in the best shape that I ever have been, or I want to be stronger than I ever have been, and I mean, it's good to have, maybe those more, finite, outlandish goals on paper for yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
But to put that kind of pressure on a coach and say, you know what, I want my pro card and I want you to give it to me, that's a turnoff.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one thing you don't like to see. What is something you like to see? Like,
well, just like I said, I like to see, I want to be my best ever. I want to be in the best shape that I ever have been, Okay. I want to be
versus the external validation.
There you go.
Right?
There you go. I want to be better than I was my last prep. Whether it's bigger, leaner, whatever, better poser, etc. Those are the things that I really like to see.
Expectations from yourself, they should be bigger than some pro card. Like, what do you like? Because you scale them. Take some self awareness to know like where you're at in terms of say just talent, right? And once you get that out the way, like I feel like I'm my harshest judge.
Oh yeah,
like I could win WNBF lights, and I could be the world champion in the lightweight division. But if I felt like that prep didn't represent like what I'm capable of, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It does not matter at all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, let's face it. A lot of times, this is an evolution. We're going to learn as we go along. And it's just like I told you guys last night. In 2008, I was sure that if I just got in my absolute most shredded condition, I was going to beat Alberto. I was sure of it. That's all I had to do. And remember, I was messaging you, coming for you, Berto.
Oh, yeah.
I'm coming for you. I didn't know any better. I
was
didn't
gonna
know.
block you, man.
At the time, I didn't know that there was no way I was going to beat you. Not on that day, not on any day. You know, when you're at your best and I'm at my best, there's no way that's going to happen. But it took me, 6-7 years to figure that out. So yeah, kind of those internal goals is something I really, really like to see.
I don't mind the pro card if it's realistic. Like if it's on the app, hey, I want a pro card.
Well, because you're self-aware.
If they're self-aware,
yeah.
like, okay, this person is obviously a veteran. They've been around a little while. They have the physique already established. The base is there. They have the knowledge behind it. They have knowledge about nutrition and training. Then it's like, okay, yeah, this is realistic. I also don't mind it on a younger person.
Yeah.
If they say, I want a pro card in X years, like it's
There
realistic.
you go.
Like they know that this is going to be a process. Okay, level 1, let's learn everything. Level 2, let's experience it. Level 3, let's keep bettering the processes until we can get there. That I don't mind. Like I had one guy on an application, I want to be world champion. I looked at it like, whoa. And then I kind of read the rest of the application, saw his photos. I'm like, okay, is this realistic? Maybe, maybe not. But it's like he has a 2024, so what, a 6-7 year plan.
Yeah.
And Skyping with him for the first time, I just, by talking through him, I know what his work ethic was like. Obviously, the physique spoke volumes, a tremendous physique. Very humble and hardworking, and wanting to learn. That was really key. Like, the willingness to learn. And so far, like, the relationship between us has been really, really solid. And when we do Skype and have these follow-ups, he's giving me great feedback. Like, this is working well, this doesn't work well, this feels good, this don't. So it's like we're evolving together. Like, okay, he's learning more about my coaching styles, and I'm learning about him as an athlete and as a person, which I think is huge. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like to see on the app, like, just like Brad was kind of saying, realistic expectations. That's huge, and understanding kind of where you're at in the process.
And sometimes we do have to kind of break people's dreams a little bit. If you would have told me in 2008, Brad, I'm sorry, you're never going to beat Alberto, that would have shattered me. You know what I mean? I had to kind of learn that on my own, you know. And at the same time, it would have been kind of nice if maybe like a year or two later, you know, Jeff would have came to me and he says, you know, Brad, I really appreciate your hard work, but you're not going to beat Alberto. You're not going to, without breaking your hips, you're not going to have his symmetry. You know what I mean? And sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we just have to say, this is realistic. I'm sorry, this is not.
And it goes both ways. You might have an athlete that's very gifted, and you're like, you know what, dude, what are you doing? Like, people wish they were as blessed as you were. Like, do something with this. And then sometimes it's like, you know, you as a coach, you have to tell an athlete, you know what, I think our goals are not all the way appropriate. I think we need to go back and really just establish a slightly different outlook on the sport.
Yeah. Sure. And that's a very hard thing too, is when you do have that gifted athlete and you know that they could get a pro card and they could be a world champion, but they get in their own way.
Yeah.
They don't execute protocols. They don't do what's needed. They kind of rely on their genetics.
Yeah.
And they never make it, you know. That's almost more heartbreaking in a way.
When I get an app, I like, there was things here that kind of conflicted where this attribute, if you go too far with this in this direction, it kind of takes away from that one. And like, you know, a lot of things have to kind of be in sync. So I like to, you know, see someone who is like, okay, you're disciplined, but you're not like overly neurotic and sorting, you know, too many of the details. Because here's the truth: is like all really, really good coaches. It's not like they have the routine. It's not like they have the macro setup. It's like, to be honest, it's just the really, really fancy schmancy, like crazy, way out there plans, like spreadsheets that break your phone. Like that's not what the best do. Like, things are like the basic fundamentals are like they're not that complicated. And you know, my thing is like, I like to see your fundamentals taken care of. I like to see that you can commit. Like, yes, like your dedication to hard work shows up through the application, but not like your dedication to, I guess, burning yourself out in the next 2 years and being done with the sport. So yeah, it's a sport of extremes, but it's crazy how being balanced is what really creates the most extreme results. Yeah.
And yeah, just like we kind of found out with the overall winner yesterday, when he finally struck that fine balance of being rigid but flexible, just enough neurotic, but just enough, executing. That's when nirvana happens.
No, that Ace is a great example of that. Yeah,
that's what happened in 2014 during my prep. Like, I was the most flexible I've ever been, and less neurotic.
Yeah.
But it was the least amount of stress I've ever had in prep, and it ended in a good result.
Yes.
And there was times where you were suffering. I remember.
Oh yeah. No, I had my moments of digging. I was installing dining room floors a week before Worlds.
Yeah.
It was pretty brutal at times, but I allowed myself to be flexible.
Yeah.
Like, if I can't train today for some reason, that's okay. I'll do it tomorrow, and muscle ain't going anywhere in a day.
Yeah. But at the same time, you didn't write that session off either.
No. Everything just gets pushed back. I'm still putting the work in.
Yeah.
Just, your body don't know you're doing it in a 7-day period. It's okay. It's an 8-day period. Big deal.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I guess to seal this, there might be some younger athletes out there who they're wrapping this up with us. Like, that didn't make any sense. But there's going to be some guys out there who've done this long enough, who they're in the right place. Yeah. And like, these dudes are getting shredded. They're getting the most out of the sport, and they're going to be like, I wish I knew that. I would have understood this all the way 10 years ago. So I guess parting thoughts are, if this doesn't make sense to you, put it away. Keep doing your thing. Try to, whatever you did get from it, apply this stuff to your situation, and then come back at some point, re-listen to it, and if it makes sense and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about, then you, my friend, I think are in a good place.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.